Welcome back to Narrative Dive, where we are deep diving into the stories dominating our world. Today, I'm with Emmanuel Acheampong, whom I came across on LinkedIn because he is a technologist, developer, engineer, technology enthusiast. I became interested in interviewing him because his posts on LinkedIn are very in-depth on AI development, but also gives a much broader perspective on the industry as a whole. So welcome, Emmanuel. I'm very excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. I'm excited to have this conversation with you as well, too.
What are some of the dominant narratives that you've encountered about AI's ability to see and understand humans? Because there's a lot of talk about that these days.
The main narrative has been that because AI is really being built, like the actual models are actually being built by very few subset of people, right? Obviously, like not all and not everybody can be building AI at the same time, right? It's a very, very small group of engineers who are building it. Some of their experiences might not be reflective of the entire narrative of not just the narrative, but the entire perspective of the world. So sometimes it's just a few blind spots that, engineers might not necessarily pay close attention to, right? So I think that's like the biggest narrative is this assumption that inclusivity and equity in AI is something that AI engineers are not mostly paying attention to because they're a very small group that are building large models for all groups of people to use, right? Very few people are building things to be used by a lot of people, but a lot of people's perspectives are not being taken into account when building these models.
It's a treat to be able to talk to somebody who can dispel some of these narratives floating around out there. I want to get a sense of where you're coming from. So what inspired you to get into developing AI technologies?
I did my undergrad in computer science and math in Kentucky at a college called Berea College. And I was very, very fortunate during those experiences. I did a ton of internship, and one of my intern manager was one who actually introduced me into the field, right? So this is around 2016, 2017. He saw my interest in math and he was like, hey, AI is going to be a huge thing, like in the future, right? So, and I see that you're interested in math. I think that that intersection of math and computer science would be really great for you to explore. So I began exploring it. And as I was like exploring it and building projects for like real world issues, that's when I met a friend who was a makeup artist who was having this issue of finding the right foundation shade for her skin tone. At the time, there was a lot of trial and error. So people would just go to the store and swipe on your face like, hey, does this match to this match? And anyone who is into computer vision can easily recognize that this is a computer vision AI problem, right? This is something that AI could help solve. So that was when, oh, okay, I already have the skill set and this is a real world problem that people are facing. How can I apply my skill sets to this real world problem? I did start building proofs of concepts for her to try. And as she was trying, oh, this works. And it was very shocking to a few people. I was like, okay, this is something that can help. So coming from a technical background, being inspired by a mentor to enter the field and seeing that these skill sets that I've built can actually solve real world problems. That's my entire journey in the AI field.
I had written some pieces about 10 years ago about that exact topic where a lot of, especially in the beauty and the fashion industries, which are multi-billion-dollar industries. I mean, the beauty industry is one of the top industries in the world. What I ran into when I was writing these pieces about 10 years ago was that there were few predetermined skin shade tones, like you just mentioned, matching the foundation. And that was a big complaint that a lot of women had, especially darker skinned women, that there was maybe one shade that was supposed to represent them, but did not represent the multitude of shades that a skin tone has. And this becomes really tricky when you're trying to make a multidimensional product. It has multiple uses. So with your company, you are building AI and machine learning algorithms that actually teach machines to see all of these human skin shades in lighting and atmospheric conditions. And you have a very impressive 12 million image data set around this with 100 labels. We'll get into what that means. The fact that your algorithms work with various verticals, like not only beauty and fashion, which are obviously already dominant industries, but self-driving cars and autonomous industrial machines, it seems like it's really has a broadly spread out use in very different things. But what are some of the real world implications when these AI systems don't recognize darker skin tones?
Yeah, so excellent question. I think, like you mentioned, right? The thing that really helped us was that we were starting with the beauty space. And like you said, these conversations about undertones are things that the beauty space talks about, right? These are not regular conversations that engineers and technologists really talked about. So for example, if you were to just Google image search like dark skin with I don't know, like olive undertones or like dark skin with red undertones, the image quality you're gonna see a lot of bad images, right? Because it's not something that a lot of engineers really focus on. So if let's say your porcelain skin with I don't know, like green undertones, just an example here. Like this is not something that you can regularly get access to when you're trying to even Google image search. There is something called the Fitzpatrick scale, which was the scale range of the human skin tones. And even that is very narrow. I think it's about 10 shades. And anyone who wears makeup know that if you're a makeup brand and you come up with foundation with just 10 skin shades, you're going to get a lot of backlash in social media. So I think that what we were able to understand was that the beauty space had this very unique problem that was beneficial to the AI industry, right? So usually a lot of times we hear that AI is going to do this in this industry or do that in this industry. But sometimes you realize that the industries can also dictate how AI should be built, right? And in this case, the beauty space was really what opened our eyes that, hey, these AI models don't need to have just 3 skin shades. The beauty people understand that there's more human skin shades and that no matter who you are, your skin is going to show up differently in different lighting conditions. Your skin shade in the summer is different from your skin shade in the winter, right? So these are things that people who wear makeup or people in the beauty in this space understand, but people who are in AI really didn't get. So that intersection is where we sit comfortably at. But the implications are a lot, right? So we've seen a lot of stories of self-driving cars that couldn't properly identify dark-skinned people in low lighting. This could be a potentially cause, harm or get into a few accidents. If we get into a world where it's fully autonomous, where cars should be able to identify you no matter what your skin tone is under whatever lighting, right? If there's like poor lighting, it shouldn't be an excuse to get into an accident of that. And even if we were to look beyond like just the technology field, we've been doing a little bit of research into this, but the cancer like melanoma, it appears differently on different skin tones. So again, if we are envisioning a world where AI is prevalent in all industries, right, being able to identify things that show up differently on different skin tones is super important as well, right? So those are some of the implications, especially where we sit comfortably with is the intersection of AI and identifying humans under all lighting and weather conditions.
Back whenever Web 2 technologies were being developed, for example, there was a lot of backlash, or at least I've covered this in my journalism. There was a lot of backlash on how those technologies were used towards certain groups of people. And what we trace the root back to is that the people that were developing the technologies weren't those groups of people, right? So we ended up with situations where we had a VR space that didn't have initially a personal space bubble, for example, for someone to block someone who was harassing them. But the people that designed it predominantly were not people that would likely get harassed on the platform. So do you think it's because a lot of the people designing AI tools and applications or APIs are not people that would need that representation or that are not represented?
I think the bigger problem, because again, I think that anyone should be able to build anything. It's just they are not they're not having conversations with actual users of their products. So let's say you don't have to be, I don't subscribe to the notion that, for example, only makeup artists should build AI for makeup users. Like that's a very unfair statement to make. Or only like car mechanics should build AI for self-driving cars, right? Like that I think is not a fair statement to make. But I do believe that if you're building for all groups of people, you should make sure to take the thoughts, the opinions, the considerations, the research surrounding all your potential users into account so that things don't get missed. So if you look at all the large AI companies, they have fairly small teams. There's billions of people in the world. It's impossible to hire, let's say, 1 million engineers to build technology for 1 billion people. But if you are 10 engineers building for 1 billion people, you need to consider all the potential possibilities of what your potential users could be using your technology for, right? So I think that is a bigger issue, right? That I don't think really happens. I think usually because engineers are smart, they build something, it works for their scenario, and then they put it in the world. And that's what a lot of the issues I think in AI is occurring, that whenever you do build something, you need to make sure that if your potential users are wide, you need to make sure as you're building it, you take all that into consideration while building it. So
When we think about AI, we don't think of what the picture we get in our heads is not who are the people behind the curtain, if you will. And we don't realize that there's such small groups of people building
yeah,
something that's so ubiquitous, which was very similar to what we experienced with Web 2. Whenever it first the platform landscape, you had a small group of people building this platform that ballooned into billions of people using it. Now I think most of the planet uses platform technologies as well. And we're getting to that point with AI. So if you can tell us what, for those listening that don't understand what this means, what is a 12 million image data set with 100 labels?
if you wear makeup, you know that for most beauty companies, they have a set number of skin shade range, right? So whenever pop star Rihanna launched Fenty Beauty, she launched it with 40 skin shade ranges, which changed the whole dynamic landscape of the beauty industry. So the goal is that every major skin shade, which is either porcelain, fair, medium, olive, and dark skin, they all have certain undertones. So all those undertones need to be represented in that particular skin shade range, specifically for makeup. And I first launched with 40 skin shade range, and then I think she expanded it to now 60. So 60 right now is kind of like the industry standard for makeup foundation. So even Lady Gaga's House Beauty has 60 shade ranges. Ariana Grande's Rem Beauty has 60 shade range. So 60 is kind of like the sweet spot, right? So if you think of that as in, hey, my makeup shade is like 1 all the way to 60, right? Or for Rihanna's case, it's like 100 all the way to, I think, 420 or something like that. Yeah, that's what we do. We look at each of those shades and we have the data set for people who have that particular shade. So that shade is just your main skin shade, the undertones in it. So we've expanded it. We started with 5 and then we went to 13, then we went to the 40, the 60, and now we have 100. So 100 skin shades, and each of them have a specific amount of images, right? And so that's what the data set of 12 million comes from, right? So it's like, we want to make sure that at least for the 100 skin shades that we have, each of that shade has the data that we need to train all the algorithms that we do train on. So that's the origin of the 12 million images with the 100 skin shades.
Wow. And what are the challenges in training those algorithms?
So the main challenge I would say is the gathering of the data. So like I mentioned right now, if you were to go to Google Images and you type in dark skin with olive undertones or dark skin with red undertones, yeah, it's very bad, right? So what we had to do was we had to speak and do a lot of conversations with a lot of estheticians and dermatologists and makeup artists so that we understood it. Yeah, because this data set doesn't exist in the world, right? Like you can just go online and find this data set, right? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the algorithms, which are just scraping the internet and then training, that's sometimes certain things get missed. So having conversations with dermatologists, having to manually help them establish what that scale range is, what the RGB colors are for each skin shade and each undertones, and the difference between your face shade and your neck shade for certain people, and what that particular shade would look like in the winter, the summer, and the fall, what it would look like with phone lighting, what it would look like in natural lighting. All those considerations is what we needed to take in mind in order to build the data set. So that is actually like that was the hardest part of the process. But after you build it, going to get a little bit more technical, it's about storing the data. So you need a lot of storage, but thankfully the cloud exists. So we use a lot of cloud technology. And then then in terms of the training, right? I'm sure people have heard about like GPUs and being GPU poor and GPU rich, right? So we do need heavy infrastructure in order to train 12 million images. It's not something that you can just do on your laptop. Otherwise, it would take forever. So even with a large amount of GPU infrastructure, we'll be able to take our time to train it for certain amounts of time. But yeah, that's basically the entire process for us. But I would say gathering the data is the most difficult, insanely difficult aspect.
I didn't consider that for AI, you would also be doing a fair amount of like qualitative research, right? In talking to actual people, because whenever we think of, or at least the narrative around AI for I would say the common person who is not a developer or software engineer or doesn't have the higher level technical knowledge, is that AI just multiplies itself. The data sets like expand upon themselves. They take what's already exists and expands upon that as more information comes into the picture. But I don't have the picture in my head of somebody going out and interviewing a dermatologist and actually putting human time into developing a data set, which is very fascinating to me. People actually go out and do this type of almost like ethnographic or qualitative research to increase their data set's viability.
And not everybody does this. So like there are people who are building these large language models. I don't think they really care. They just scrape all the internet's data and then they just train their models. So, but for us, again, what we are trying to do doesn't really exist. So that's the difference. So it's not like we could scrape the internet and be like, hey, this is what it is, right? So that's where there's like slight differences in different types of models. I do believe some teams do it. I believe that even teams that are building for the medical field, they absolutely need to do this, right? They need to do a lot of like you said, the ethnographic surveys and conversations, right? Because you can't just trust a model that, okay, this works. No, you need to make sure you're confirming with doctors, etc. So yeah, it depends on what the problem you're trying to solve. If your problem if the solution doesn't really exist and you're trying to build something from scratch, that's where a lot of these conversations can take place. But yeah, different teams do different things.
So that's for anyone listening. You don't have to worry. AI is not all built by just scraping the internet, like you just said. And I had wondered what implications that would have for healthcare type of AI, because I do have a friend whom I'm getting on this show who's very active in the AI healthcare space and has actually been in the space before AI was cool. I think VR was even cool back when he got into the AI space. So he's a true veteran. In terms of the healthcare, you would have probably massive amounts of hallucinations if you were trying to just scrape things off the internet and come up with data sets. And then another thing that comes to mind when you were talking about this is there's that adage that says we don't know what we don't know. In this age of everything being on a mobile phone, I'm sitting here scrolling through, and you said skin olive undertone. What pops up, and it's just a bunch of cosmetic ads or images. What's so interesting to me is in that we don't know what we don't know is we only know whatever technology data sets are telling us at the moment. And we don't think of our brains as that manipulated or that configured. If our data sets aren't expanded, our minds are not expanded either. So the technology will grow. Our knowledge will grow with the technology's knowledge at the same time. We talked about before when we had a separate conversation about how your technology differs from traditional computer vision systems when it comes to detecting skin tone. And you had touched on that a little bit better. Can you explain what computer vision is versus what your technology is?
Our technology is an aspect of computer vision. We use the same models that computer vision does. So classification, object detection, all those things, localizations, we do all that, segmentations, we do all that. So we are a subset of computer vision. The only main difference is that, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the algorithms focuses on things like the Fitzpatrick scale. And I think even Google launched the Monk scale for like 10 skin shade range but we have like a wider skin shade range, like 100. And we have different types of algorithms that are built on top of that, right? So yeah, we leverage computer vision. So it's not different.
There's this thesis in tech philosophy. It's called the Value Neutrality Thesis. And it basically asserts that technology is neutral, that its whole moral value depends on how it's used by humans. And this really puts the responsibility in the user's hands and not the tech itself. And I want to ask a lot of people who build AI, from your work, do you find this thesis to be accurate?
I don't think the people who build it to be nefarious, right? Because a lot of times there's the data sets that we build on or we train on, and then there's a lot of internal validations that we do, but those validations don't necessarily always reflect the real world validation. So I think let's look at ChatGPT, for example. I'm sure that they did a lot of evaluations, and then you can always see like the metrics. Every time they release a new model, they'll tell you the metrics of that model. It scores, I don't know, like 76% on this particular test cases or whatever. But in the real world, people use it for different types of things, right? There is literally no way for the internal team to think about all the different ways or all the different prompts that people are going to be typing into ChatGPT, for example. So that is where the issue comes in. So I would say that, yeah, I do think that technology might be neutral, but when you train it, that data could be skewed a particular way that the engineers might not fully be aware of. Because if you're looking at large amounts of data, you're probably not reading every article. You're probably not reading every text. The building of the technology could be neutral, but the data could be skewed a particular way. And then the results, right, might not be something that the engineers or the people who are building it fully comprehend its impact or its usage in the external world. So I do, again, I believe, this is my personal belief, that not a lot of people are building the technology to be malicious, right? But it ends up being that way because of how the data is skewed.
I was thinking about it in terms of users, how users manipulate technologies or how they have in the past. And one of those test cases was from the last generation of platform was Facebook, how it was initially used in dorm rooms in universities. And then during the Arab Spring, it became highly weaponized towards certain groups of people right out from under the nose of the people who built it. But you brought up a good point about how data can change everything, and you can have anyone who studied statistics. It's quite simple to skew statistics in a way that paint an entirely separate picture than what may actually be true. So I want to go back to the beauty industry. What current narratives in the beauty industry can influence or conflict with AI development in that space? Are there any competing narratives that you've encountered in building this out?
Yeah, so I think that the good narrative is that now I know that in the tech world, like, inclusivity is becoming, I don't know, people are like shying away from it and moving away from it because of the current climate that we're in. But I think the beauty space is still embracing it. There's now, like, there was a time when Korean brands didn't really expand their skin shade range. Now they're expanding the skin shade ranges, right? I think that people still call out brands that don't satisfy a particular skin shade range still. So I think that that narrative is going on. So even though like tech is kind of moving away from DEI in general, I think the inclusivity aspect is something that the beauty space is running towards. So they are a bit more skeptical to receive AI if it's not working for all their customers than other verticals. So the adoption of AI hasn't been as quick in the beauty space as other spaces, not because they don't want it. They absolutely want it. You can see L'Oreal acquired an AI startup. They're all building some form of beauty chatbot, but their adoption is slower because for them, inclusivity is an economic value for them. It's not political. They need to make more money, so they need to make sure that their products are fitting larger groups of people. And so they are trying to make sure that each technology they adopt is technology that is fitting for their customer base. So they're a little slower, and I don't have the numbers, but the beauty vertical is slower to adopt like AI across all these many users than other verticals, mainly because of that, right? They want to ensure that AI is working for all their customers. So I would say that that is like the good narrative. But the other one is that, on the flip side, is that the beauty customers are not as, how do I put this? They are not as accepting of high technology as other groups of customers, right? So for them, their main focus is they can buy something and they can use it. Like, as a consumer, they just want to buy and use. They don't really care about like high-end technology of the latest models that is trending on Twitter or what, I don't know, the difference between DeepSeek and ChatGPT. They're just looking to buy it. So their adoption of technology is also slow in that sense, where it's like, oh, why should I use AI when, my favorite influencer can tell me what brands I can buy on TikTok, right? So that adoption is also slow. So I think those are the two main narratives. Companies are slower to adopt it because they want to make sure that AI works for all their customers, not just a select few. And consumers themselves are just slower to adopt the AI technology because their current system they have in place works for them. So it's just adopting new technology is kind of harder for them.
That's fascinating because what you said about influencers in essentially influencing people to buy these products versus them trusting in AI. And now we're coming on the verge of having virtual influencers. Now we're on the cusp of being able to generate AI avatars where beauty influencers could become AI generated representations.
So I think that might be like further down the line. Again, I think
Okay.
the average beauty consumer really still is attached to their influencer, their human influencer. Like, do think further down the line that could happen. And I think that's great. But I think the adoption it will be, again, like I said, will be slower than in other fields because the average beauty consumer, they have their favorite makeup artists, they have their favorite influencers that they gravitate towards, they have their favorite stores that they go to, they have maybe celebrity brands that they want to try. So I think that adoption obviously is going to get to that point, but I think it will be a slower journey than like that quick adoption like other verticals.
That makes sense because it is a very personal,
Yeah.
human type space. And
Like,
most women I know who use beauty products don't buy them unless they got a referral from someone else that actually
yeah.
said, "Oh, this worked for me." With your data set creation, different cultures have different perspectives on what is beautiful. So, how does that influence your approach to data set creation, or how are you able to work with that?
So when we started, we had like 5 skin shades, then we went to 13 and then 40. But then the constant feedback was that, hey, this and this and that, right? So like we used to recommend beauty products to people. We started with a few like popular brands and then people were like, no, we want these drugstore brands. So we had to include the drugstore brands. Then we started seeing that a lot of the users were in, I think, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. They had a whole different types of brands that they wanted to use, right? It's like you said, like makeup, the application of makeup is very different for different cultures, right? So all that informed our creation of the skin shade ring. So the 100 was to make sure that all these are accounted for. The discoveries that we made that I didn't personally know was how like diverse the skin shade range of Southeast Asia is. So a lot of times when people think about like the diversity of skin tones, they mostly focus on dark skin tones or like Black people. But it's like when you go to Southeast Asia, like that entire region, the skin shade range is so wide. Like medium, again, the different undertones and the medium and olive skin would be like, I think it's wider than what the different types of dark skin that we had in the data set, right? So that's like a main thing that we found out, right? Yeah. So all that is accounted for in the data set, but honestly, like I mentioned, that is the biggest discovery. And I think having those conversations with experts and dermatologists was like, okay, now we understand what we are trying to do.
I could see how this technology could have some medical implications in the future where might be able to help recognize detection of melanoma or something.
What we're hoping for.
where you start over time to have a darker spot on your body somewhere that's could potentially be, skin cancer or something. And I was recently speaking at the UN this week, and I was working with a woman who has an AI technology who was also a venture capitalist. And she was saying how every time someone develops an AI technology, all these other people get in line to tell you how it can be used in other industries. apart from what you're actually trying to use it for. And they say you should work that into your sales pitch and your elevator pitch. But hey, okay, I'm not trying to get into healthcare yet. Like it would be great if that became a secondary market. But it does seem like having something so in depth can be very helpful in that realm as well, and many others. Especially like how you said with self-driving cars, how at night the self-driving car may not recognize that a person is standing there, which is a huge liability for the car company and another person's life to, possibly be hit by a car. But I was wondering how this works with industrial machines too, because you had mentioned that as well.
I don't know if you've ever heard that story of one of the Facebook engineers who couldn't get the lidar on, not the lidar. Oh, I forget the name, but the whenever you go to the bathroom, being able to sense your skin shade in order for the faucets to sense your skin and then start allowing water to flow through. Right. That is the airport or the restaurant. So whenever I go to the bathroom, it doesn't usually, especially for the cheaper sensors, they can't really detect darker skin. So a dark skin person puts the hand under the faucet, it wouldn't detect the skin and then it wouldn't let water flow through. So that's the same sensors that are being used for these industrial machines. If you're not able to detect the human skin or a hand, it could cause a massive accident. So yeah, so those are some of the underlying things that we are discussing and having conversations around, right? To make sure that as we're building these sensors, we can detect all skin shades so that we don't cause accidents in the industrial space.
I definitely wanted to go back to the human diversity piece. We've entered, not to get political, but in this new realm of US politics, an era that is moving away with, some would say, a very strong force away from diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. How might teaching AI to see everyone change the stories that we tell about human diversity, despite all of the political will to move away from it?
I think there's multiple answers to this. Like I mentioned, the beauty space is one that is still embracing inclusivity, diversity, skin shades, and because they've found the economic value, like beauty brands have an actual economic value to like the inclusivity the brand. If you look at Rihanna's Fenty Beauty, she introduced a new way of creating shades for 40 skin shades, and that got her to the billionaire status faster than any female musician at that point. And then we see someone like Selena Gomez, following the same footsteps with Rare Beauty, entering the billionaire status. So in the beauty space, like, because we work in the beauty space, like there's a real economic value there. So when people are complaining about DEI, like beauty brands don't, because they know that beauty brand can be launched today and cater to all skin shades and get to billionaire status in a year or two. We want to make sure technology is working for everybody, right? A lot of technology companies, they measure the number of users who are satisfied with their product. So if your product is able to satisfy a wider range of users, that is a feather in your cap, right? So it's like you built technology that billions and billions of people are using and finding value, as opposed to building technology that only a small fraction of the population can find value in, right? Like there's that sense of, okay, your technology can work for more people. So that's also a good thing. Yeah. Those are the two things that I'll say. There's a real economic value, and we can use the beauty industry or the beauty vertical as a test case. And then there's the ability to build technology that works for all groups of people, which I think every technology company is looking for. Right? They want more users. They want more monthly active users. They want more people to stay on their platforms for longer. If your product is working for more people, that becomes a consequence of all the action.
That makes sense. Money talks over political narratives, it appears. What do you hope to see shift in the next decade when it comes to AI and inclusion?
We need more groups of people building it. The reason why I say that is because when different types of people are building it, they can solve different problems. I say this with all humility, but if you look at a lot of the startups in the AI space that are getting a lot of funding, they are kind of building the same things. It's like we have 100 startups who are all building the same thing. There might be some tweaks out there. My model is like 2% better than your model, but you're all building the same thing. If we want to solve all the world's problems, I think we need to invite more people in so that they can be tackling other issues that certain small fractions, they can't see those issues, right? Because they don't experience it. They don't understand the economic value of it, right? So again, I use the beauty thing because that's what we've been in and we're looking at, right? If you told like a tech bro, hey, you can become a billionaire with makeup faster than you could be as a tech founder, they'll probably not understand, right? Like if you told someone that, hey, makeup that people are wearing is like worth billions, right? L'Oreal is making billions, right? I think there was a time where I don't want to get this wrong, but there was a time where a beauty brand had the same return rate as Nvidia, right? I think as Nvidia was like 1,000, there was another beauty brand that had like 1,000 like score, right? So the world's problems are almost infinite. There are so many problems. So if we invite more people in, they can try to start tackling the problems and then we can all develop as a society. But I think this might be controversial, but I think that is because there's like a pipeline issue. Uh, Again, I've been through the whole PhD recruiting cycle, and most of the advancement in AI is happening at the research and the higher educational level, most of the baseline of it. But there's a pipeline issue where because universities can only recruit very few number of students, and I think that number is even being cut now due to all that is happening, only certain groups of people are getting that opportunity. So it's like there's a pipeline issue that is preventing different groups of people to get into to solve different problems, right? So I hope that in 10 years that gets addressed so that, again, we all want to see the problems of the world getting solved at a much faster rate. And I think inviting more people in could be the quickest or the most efficient way to do that.
That goes back to what you were saying about how we don't often see the people behind the curtain building the technologies, and we don't actually realize how small of groups those technologies are for something that's so ubiquitous. And I'm guessing that you take that stance maybe because, and for anyone listening, he does teach. So you are part of bringing people into the technology by teaching.
Yeah.
You're a Coursera project instructor with over 4,000 students and a near perfect instructor ratings. So there's a tradition that I have on this podcast where I ask every guest the same closing question, and it's an important question. What narrative have you challenged lately, and why?
So there's a narrative that this is specific to AI conferences. There's a narrative that only certain like people with certain pedigrees should be presenting their work at AI conferences. I think that anyone who is putting the work and is advancing knowledge should like submit to conferences to speak. So yeah, whether it's CVPR, which is the world's premier computer vision conference, or ICCV, or any of those large conferences, I think the narrative that like only certain people who belong to certain research labs are the only ones who are allowed to, submit their work to present, I think is false. I think that we need to hear a lot more of what other people are doing, right? We need to put a spotlight on different people and what they are doing so that it can encourage more people to join. So yeah, I would say that that's the narrative that I really would love to see challenge more. But I try to do it by sharing those opportunities on my platforms.
Does that come from your experience building and leading AI teams with real focus on diversity and teaching as well, trying to bring more people into the space?
Absolutely. And I've been to a few conferences and I've spoken at a few conferences. And I think my takeaway was like, these people are not much more smarter than me, which again, if you're like applying a lot of times, it's like, oh, I'm not good enough to speak at these conferences, so I'm not good enough to share my knowledge with the world, which I think, that's not I really hope that narrative changes.
Absolutely. Well, Emmanuel, thank you for joining me on this episode of Narrative Dive. I was enthusiastic about talking to you about your work, especially going back to the point where you said there's very few people developing the AI technologies. And although I hear some people being as outspoken as you on LinkedIn about many things, they don't do it with the diplomacy that you do. So if anyone's not following him on LinkedIn, they should be if they want to learn more about the AI space, particularly his experiences and knowledge and research. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I really enjoyed this conversation.